Ready now.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our third and final webinar in the Spring Public Services series. I'm Jamie Machek, the education consultant with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service. I'm so glad you're here with us today to listen to Becky Spratford. She is an RA expert. And I know a lot of you are going to be, are very excited to be here today to listen to what she has to say. It's sort of a COVID edition of RA, if you will. If you missed the other two webinars in our series, they are posted on our website. I highly encourage you to listen to those. They were excellent. I know today's webinar is going to be excellent as well. So I will stop talking so we can hear Becky. That's why you're all here. So Becky, take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Jamie. I hope I live up to it. So this is the reimagined sort of signature RA for All talk, and actually, you guys are getting an even more updated. I update this pretty much every time I give it, but you guys are getting a brand new version that's never seen before with some additions. And yes, I have made changes because of COVID, so we're going to talk about that. But here's the thing I need everybody to understand: these slides and the handouts I'm going to refer to will be sent to you or be posted, as Jamie said, on that page. So one of them is going to be slightly interactive, and I've recreated it on the screen. So everybody take that brain you were using to share the books you're reading and get out a piece of scrap paper, something to write on. You have time, so I'm giving you a warning to go look for that, but I'm sure you all have something to write on nearby, or open a window and do it digitally, and get ready. But here's the question you're going to need to think about, and I'm going to remind you of it a few times. Not just what you're reading now. Instead, I want you to answer, pick a favorite book, a book you really love. Think about it. You might want to write down a few right now. It needs to be from middle grade and up. It can be fiction or nonfiction, because we are going to flip the script today and you're going to think like a reader. We're going to reconnect you with your love of reading and why you love it. And we're going to do it. It's the entire time. I want you to be thinking of a specific book. It's going to make this more interactive and helpful. There will be a few polls and there will be a chance to share if you want. Again, I usually do this in an hour and a half, so we're going to go through some things quickly. The live slides, though, have so many links to more places where you can go for longer explanations of the things that I'm going to talk about. So don't worry at all. I want to start, first of all, though, with why I call my company RA for All. This is one of those brand new slides that I'm sharing. And there's a couple reasons, but the main reason is the inclusivity. That's why I do this. This inclusivity is extremely important. I called my company RA for All for the first reason was because I believe Reader's Advisory is a core service that can be done by every single staff member at the library from different learning points, as we're going to see, but everybody has a love of books, has a story about books that brings them to work at the library. If you don't, you would be working somewhere else for more money. And that goes back to the fact that Duncan Smith has said that books are our brand. It is what people associate with the library with. And therefore, it's very important to understand that the patrons see us about books. And if we go to the right, we can look at a series of posts I put up in July that deal with COVID. So when I started my company, really as consulting in 2015, I had a lot of people in leadership in the library world who said to me, Becky, this is great that you want to do this, that you want to stop being at a library and do this full time, but no one's going to hire you. You know, libraries aren't about books anymore. We're trying to get away from books. We're all about our spaces. Well, you know what, guess what? 2020 showed when our spaces were unavailable. Actually, no, we were still extremely important and we were all about books. And I can't even tell you how busy I've been. You guys are people I've worked for before. I love coming back to Wisconsin and working with Jamie and everybody. But so many people are discovering Reader's Advisory for the first time in the last year. And I can barely keep up. And it's because the people in power who don't work at the desk, who didn't understand and embrace this idea, didn't realize how much Reader's Advisory was happening. And then the other thing, reason why I called RA for All, and I just added this to the slide because I always say it here, but I never have anything to back it up. So this is a quote from author Kathy Koja. And actually, if you follow me at all, you know that I run a thing called Summer Scares, which is a reading program. You can access it on my blog. Anywhere you see RA for All, you can click on it in the live slides and it'll take you there. You can learn about Summer Scares, but it's a reading program of horror to read over the summer. And Kathy Koch is one of our authors this year in the adult area. Somebody mentioned Mexican Gothic. Sylvia Moreno Garcia is our celebrity spokesperson. So she was with us who picked this title. So Kathy recently posted, remember, books are the words, the delivery system may vary. This captures the thing I always say on this slide too, is I'm going to talk a lot about books, but books are not just the physical thing you hold. They're ebooks, they're audiobooks, and they're graphic novels. And straight up, RA for all readers too. If you don't believe that audiobooks or graphic novels are reading, I'm done talking to you right now, and you're done listening to me because you're wrong, and we're not going to be able to agree. It's just wrong. So this is sort of all the reasons behind why it's RA for all. And all right, then we're going to do this. For some reason, it didn't want to use the clicker. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned. We're going to recapture your love of books as a reader. This is the way you're going to be able to understand Reader's Advisory. And because this is going to be more of a train the trainer type audience here, I go to lots of libraries and talk to the whole library, and I realize you guys are people that are already interested in Reader's Advisory. But so I'm looking at talking to you today for you to bring things back. And in fact, the 3 handouts you're going to get after this that we're going to talk about today too are all things you can bring back and share with staff. So capturing your love of books as a reader is a way to get all staff involved in Reader's Advisory, because you can recapture their love of books as a reader and they can participate in different ways. Also, Reader's Advisory has changed, right? We're no longer about the transactions. We're not about, someone asking us a Reader's Advisory question and giving them an answer. Reader's Advisory today is about conversations. It's about creating a place where books are discussed and books are talked about and books are shared. And the more staff we can get on board with doing that, the better Reader's Advisory environment we're creating. And we can do that with any staff member if we're not focusing on matching books with readers as much as we are about sharing books and starting those conversations. Then we're going to focus on the appeal of the books and on sharing them. And that's going to be most of what we do today, right? How to kind of get the why someone would love the book, not what happens. It doesn't matter what happens. And this big focus, as I've mentioned multiple times, when we work together, we lighten the load for everyone. Reader's Advisory, as we saw when we closed, was really busy, right? But now people know we do this. We're really busy. And if we can get more people involved to help us, which I'm going to give you concrete ways to do it, you lighten the load for everyone and you make your patrons happier because you're going to help more readers. And the other thing you're going to learn is that I'm going to give you things to take back. Reader's Advisory is one of your best team building exercises you can do as a library, as a full staff. Why? Because books are a brand, because everyone has a story related to a book that means something to them. Again, you do too. So if you're thinking about that book, write it down. Again, all of you, piece of paper, write down the author and title of at least one book that you love. It can be an all-time favorite. It can be a book you just finished and you can't stop thinking about. It can be a book that you've liked for years. It doesn't matter how long ago you read it. And no one's going to hold you to this being your all-time favorite book either. So, okay, how are we going to do this? The way I teach Reader's Advisory follows 10 rules of basic Reader's Advisory service. They are always on my blog. So while you have these slides, if the rules change, and the last time I made an update to the rules was just a few months ago. So the rules themselves don't normally change, but the examples do. And so you can go to the blog. It's always very clearly there. You just type RA for all into Google and it'll come right up because it's a Google blog and it's on the right-hand gutter. You can't miss it. But also at that link, I have the 5 resources you cannot live without. I am going to mention at least 2 of them, which are Novelist and Goodreads. So, you can go look for more there. That's where you would start. And again, the focus here on this talk is on RA service for all readers, for all staff, for all formats, everything, okay? And really distinctly discussing lessons learned from 2020, things that we can take with us. Rule number 1 is a super easy rule. Never apologize for your reading tastes. Don't apologize for yours. Don't let your patrons apologize for theirs. If you say the word guilty pleasure, stop. There are no guilty pleasures. We're dealing with pleasure reading, with leisure reading when we talk about Reader's Advisory. Everything, even if it's the current Pulitzer Prize award-winning book, is a pleasure. We don't need to put the word guilty in front of it. That already is a judgment call. Same reason why I tell you never to put the word literary in front of any genre. My editors at Booklist and Library Journal know if they put the word literary in front of the word horror in any of my reviews, I will stop working for them immediately. So, you know, just because Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia or the Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones are vying for all these literary awards right now doesn't make them literary horror. They're still horror. I have this great post about a non-judgmental list of what you should read. I also reposted on my blog recently because it's a great reminder. It's from 2012, but it's a great reminder that you should just read. In fact, that's the final list of things that you should read. You should just keep reading, whatever you want. It's a great thing to kind of re-energize yourself. It's a great thing to show your patrons. It's a great conversation starter with a patron who doesn't know what they want to read. It has like 20 great options. But the other thing I want to remind you is, you know, we don't want to make people apologize. We don't want to judge at all, but we also set bad examples, and not just with guilty pleasures or literary thriller, but also we set bad examples because we all shame each other for how many books we've read or shame ourselves for how many books we've read. So I have a longer post about that, but stop keeping track of how many books you read. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. You're not, as you're going to learn, you're actually not better at your job by reading more books. Because, well, we're going to talk about it, but there's this thing called the internet where you can read about books. And there's this thing called resources, which we sort of know how to use, right? Because we're library workers, so you don't need to, so stop. Okay, this leads me to rule number 2. It seems like semantics, right? We suggest books we don't recommend. Okay, let me start right away because I know somebody's going to say, but Becky, we have a staff recommendation shelf. Should we get rid of that? No, that is a different beast, right? That is clearly a recommendation. And I'm going to talk later about how great it is to have staff recommendation shelves, both to, excuse me, energize your staff to participate and to get your patrons excited and to lessen the load for everyone. There's just so many reasons. But when we're just talking about books, library anxiety is real. There are studies that show when people walk into the library, their heart rate goes up, they're worried, they're nervous, they don't know what to do. And they especially don't think they should ask us about things they want. They think they should only bother us about things they need. You know, you get this all the time. May I bother you? Of course you may. That's my job. Bother me. Of course, the people we don't want bothering us are the ones that don't ask, right? So library anxiety, though, is real. And we have to remember and everyone who works in a library to a patron is a capital L librarian. That's the other reason my company is called RA for All, and my tag is helping library workers help leisure readers. You know, so there's already this anxiety among the patrons that they're asking the librarian for help. We need to lessen that, okay? And we also need to lessen our anxiety, but let's start with the patron anxiety first, right? The patron anxiety is, you know, they don't know how to ask, or we're not, you know, they're afraid to ask, or they don't know if they're gonna like it, and they're nervous if they don't like it, what they do. So just make it very clear that you say, look, it sounds like this is a book you'd like because so-and-so told me about it the other day, right? Johnny told me about it the other day. It sounds like you might like it. Why don't you give it a try? If you don't like it, close the book and bring it back. We have look at all these other books and just, like, you know, show them the other books. Or if you're online, say, you know, we have this many books in our collection. We'll find something that works for you, right? 1. 2, you can say things to them like, if you didn't like it, I didn't write it. I don't care. My job is to help you find something you'll like, even if it's against what I like or it's opposition to what I like. Please. And we're going to learn about capturing this and how you can share that with your enthusiasm. The other thing I always say to people too is, you know, take a few. We don't know if you read, like, I would hate you to go home and not like it and then not have anything to read. Also, bring it back. We don't know if you've read it or not. And I always get a giggle with that. I think they think we have librarian spidey sense and we know that they've read it, right? It's hilarious. They love that. And it always makes people feel better. Find ways to, sorry, I just got a very upsetting text about something. Sorry. And I had to look at this from my husband. Find ways to make it less about recommendation and more about suggestion. Okay. Also, your anxiety, right? How do I suggest books I've never read? Well, I'm going to teach you. You read about them. If you say, I'm suggesting this, it frees you up to talk about anything. People don't need you to share your personal experience with the book. You can share the words of others, and we're going to talk about that. They just want to know that somebody enjoyed the book somewhere. And so we're going to, you know, you can share a 5-star review. I sometimes share a 2-star review on Goodreads just for them to see a different way to do things. The other thing about that is you also can share the things from reviews, and I'm just going to talk to you about it, but you share anything, you lose your anxiety because you're not worried about reading it or not. Okay, so stop worrying about only suggesting books you've read. You can if you want, but you don't need to, and we're going to talk about that. And here's the thing, here's the other thing why it doesn't matter if you've read the book or not, and this is the most important rule we've had. Everyone reads a different version of the same book. This is extremely important for people to understand. If you want to launch the poll, Jamie, we can do that. Great. So here's a great example, right? Everyone reads a different version of the same book. Answer this question. I like books with the subject headings. I'm going to talk about it while you're answering it. Historic British mystery, historic British romance. You like both or you like neither? Take a few minutes to answer this. Why am I doing this? Okay, everyone reads a different version of the same book means that even though a book might be, I'm going to give you a real example later, but even though you've read a book, the things you like about it might be different, right? Because no two books have the same plot, but everybody might see it a different way. And now I'm going to show this with plot with this, because you guys are picking subject headings. These subject headings, a lot of them deal with plot, right? Historic and British deal a lot with plot, but mystery and romance deal a lot with appeal. Now, let's keep answering it, but I'm going to tell you that if we did an algorithm, right, and we asked people if they liked historic British mystery or historic British romance, a computer would tell us that, you know, there should be 67% match between those two, right? Because 3 of the subject headings are the same. Whenever you're ready to stop it, Jamie, I'm fine with that. I can keep talking. Oh, here we go. Did it come up, the answer?
For some reason it didn't, but I will tell you that 35% said historic British mystery, 13% said historic British romance, 25% said both, and 27% said neither.
So here we go. 25% said both, okay? That's not a 67% match. And then the people who feel really strongly, who like one or the other, also had a wide range. This is, thank you so much. This is the point I'm trying to make, and you guys made it, and it always happens. The plot, if it's historic and British, we might have, there's a 25% like both, right? But when you add in mystery versus romance, it changes a lot. Oh, there we go. Thank you. It changes a lot because mysteries appeal to the intellect. It's about the puzzle. And romance appeals to the emotions. And so those are, when we're talking about different versions of the same book. Okay, we can get off of that, Jamie. I think I could. I'm not sure. Okay. And that's what I'm talking about. All right. That's how we talk about how plot isn't easily matchable, because there's that appeal. Now that's really specific, right? When we talk about why readers like a book, they use adjectives. So I'm going to show you what those are. They're appeal terms, and you're going to get a handout with them in a nice place. But the appeal terms get to the heart of why you would like a book, and those have to do with, as I said, in the case of the mystery versus romance, one is appealing to how it makes you feel, and one is appealing to a puzzle to solve, right? Those come from pacing, characterization, storyline, frame and setting, tone and mood, style, and language. When we read for appeal, we're open to more possibilities because everyone reads a different version of the same book. And I can't stress this enough. When patrons tell us what they like about a book, and if we've read it, we have to listen harder. Now, I'm going to give you an actual example. I know we did that little survey to show that, like, you know, 2 out of 3 the same, it doesn't correlate. But let's do a real example. The book is The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. I keep this book on because, 1, I don't mind spoiling it. It's older. 2, this is a great example of a book, the same book, which I have had so much feedback from patrons on different ways they've read it. Also, at least here in Illinois, it's on a lot of school reading lists. So, and again, I don't mind spoiling it, but it's a great example. So here are the actual ways the books have been described to me by patrons. For some, it's about the rape and murder of a young girl, even though she's dead, and narrating from heaven on page 1. And the description of her death is done after 20 pages. For others, it's about a book about a family dealing with a crisis. For still other patrons, it's been described to me as a book about the mourning process. And then for another person, it was described to me as a book about, since Susie is narrating from heaven, It's about, to her, it was about that something good happens to you while you are, after you die, even if you die terribly, right? Those are four completely different versions of the same books. That is very important to understand, because you would give a different suggestion based on all of those different readers, right? And a bunch of you probably read this book too, so you might have your own version. Now, later, I'm going to show you in a slide or two appeal terms, right? Which are, the adjectives I talked about. And so I could use those words, which you're going to see both in the handout you download, but also on the screen in a few minutes. That the Lovely Bones, I can describe it this way with those controlled words, is deliberate, measured, heartbreaking, yet ultimately redeeming, dramatic and introspective, with intriguing and well-developed secondary characters, a first-person narration from heaven, vivid, character-centered, complex, family-centered, inspirational, thought-provoking, tragic, some explicit but not gratuitous violence against children, bittersweet, darker, and philosophical. Again, patrons don't talk like that. I went to another extreme, just like I did to the extreme with the subject headings. But let's say this is an actual paraphrase from a patron. I just finished The Lovely Bones and really enjoyed how the book looked at each family member and how they dealt with their loss and grief differently. So we have Susie and we have 3 family members, and they're all dealing with loss and grief. So this reader liked the character-centered and the family-centered, the introspective aspects, the multiple points of view. This reader would also love The Mothers by Britt Bennett, which, although it doesn't deal with a murder, deals with a community in the 80s in Southern California, of African-American church community, and an abortion. A young woman and the reverend's son, and the abortion the young woman has, and there are multiple points of view, and has a very similar feel. You would not lead these readers toward books about the investigation of child murders, okay? However, I bring that up because everyone reads a different version of the same book. This is important to remember. The Lovely Bones was like the Where the Crawdads Sing of its time, right? It literally, like, it took forever to move into paperback. It was constantly on hold. We barely got a chance to see it. So, and it's a bestseller, so people are going for it without any intervention from us, the library worker. And a lot of them were getting it because it was on the New York Times bestseller list. And I learned this rule the hard way. Somebody came to me with The Lovely Bones and literally threw the book at me and said, "Why did you tell me to read this book? It's not a mystery." And I said, okay, first, don't throw a book at me. But secondly, I don't think I told you it was a mystery. It's not a mystery. And here's the thing, and I'm, again, spoiling it. It's not a mystery. I would never have given this to this woman who's a longtime library patron, hardcore mystery reader. Why? Because there's no closure. The book, we know who killed, the reader know who killed Susie. Her family's pretty sure they know. They never are able to bring the person to justice, nor are they even able to find her body. That would be like the worst thing that could happen to a mystery reader. So why did this person get led to it being a mystery? The New York Times bestseller list. When they have the bestseller list, they have a sentence about the book. It's going to come up in a minute too with a book I picked to share. This happens all the time. Whoever the editor's version of the book made it sound like a mystery. Susie is killed. Her family searches for answers. So this person said, "Oh, it's a mystery." And so everyone reads a different version of the same book. The thing you have to understand is that people are looking for a book with a particular feel, not a particular plot, yourself included. This comes from the book's pacing, characterization, all the areas we're about to go over. So when you read, for example, the Da Vinci Code, the first things you think of are that it's fast-paced, there are puzzles to solve, exotic locations, historical intrigue. You're not thinking about, oh, well, there's this symbiologist and blah, blah, blah. You're not doing all of that. You're thinking about those larger appeals. Also, just real quick, before we go further, we want to remember that the appeal terms need to be positive in keeping up with being non-judgmental. So it's measured pace, not slow, and it's unembellished, not simplistic. And here's the thing, right? When we're focusing on why someone likes the book and not the plot you can find everywhere. For better or worse, Goodreads has the plot. And you know what? That plot from the publisher is standard. And one of the reasons I write my reviews in Goodreads is so I'm not tempted to rehash the plot, because it's right there. The plot you can find. You need to record why you like the book, not what happens. And not only record that, but share that. So that link goes to all the adjectives. It goes to a free PDF, whether you subscribe to Novelist or not, of every appeal term and theme that they use. You can use that to help you figure it out for your book, right? Write down those adjectives. If you lose those, they will be gone. I mean, if you have novelist, you can pull up the novelist adjectives, but your specific adjectives. And actually, today I'm going to make you pick some of those for your book you're thinking of. Again, take that book that you, we're going to do an exercise with this, from this book. Take that book that you were thinking of. Again, if you haven't written one down, do it now, because you're going to have to do it. If you don't do it right now, you're going to have to do it later when you download the handout, because you're going to share this with other people. All the appeal areas are on a handout that you're going to get. They're going to be on the screen now so we can do the exercise. What I want you to do is take that book that you've been thinking of. Pick one if you had more than one, and write down the adjectives that describe your book. Now, you might pick different ones. These might just be getting you going. The key is that they're adjectives. It's not plot. You're not going to say, and we're going to use Severance as an example. There's a zombie plague, and you're going to say things like, oh, it's a satire. It has a shifting time frame. I'm going to talk you through all the areas, so don't worry. It's character centered. As you're going through the areas, there's going to be areas we get to where you are like going crazy writing words down. That area is your version of the book. So star that area, circle that area. You're going to write the heading for each thing, and then you're going to pick some words. Don't just pick 3 words. You might pick one you might have none in one area. You might not remember because it's an old favorite. It's not your version of the book. Doesn't matter. Talking about your version of the book, okay? And then we're going to talk about how you practice sharing the appeal. We can't do it here today, but you can do it back at work. Okay, so we're going to talk about Severance as my example, and then that links to my review, but I'm going to also show Severance in a few minutes. But I put them here on the slide a few minutes ahead of time because I want you to see that when I say your 3 words are not actually just 3 words, right? They're 3 areas, and you'll see some of the words that show up in the from the handout in the coming slides are not just 1 word. So in this case, I have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words, but they're 3. Okay, and these will come up again. So for me, the book is defined by the satire, the shifting time frame, and the character centered. We are going to see why me recording these words is so important. Okay, obviously this book was picked on purpose. It doesn't always work out this great, but you will see these are important. But let's worry about you right now. Okay, I'm actually going to walk you through some questions about your book to help you sort of recover it a little bit. When you get the handout, all these words will be on there too, but you can add your own. And you can also recreate that handout and use with coworkers. This is a great exercise. Pacing. This is the kind of thing like, what is the pattern you're pacing? It has the fewest words, but it's the easiest thing to remember. But some people's methodical paced book is actually somebody else's engrossing pace, right? So, you decide what is the word for you. If you can't remember, like, did your book have like short sentences, short chapters, short paragraphs? Did it have a lot of dialogue? Was it all about the action, or was it like introspective? That might help you think about the pacing. So pacing's pretty much, steadily increasing is one of my favorites. Again, that's one that's more than 1 word. Steadily increasing. That's what a lot of horror books are. Characterization. That one I spent, I'll go back for 1 second in case you couldn't think of words, but this is the easiest one to just remember or you don't. Okay. And I bet a lot of you are going to use engrossing because it's a favorite book. And that's kind of also why I choose a favorite book and not just the last book you read. Because what if you hated it? This wouldn't work. Okay, characterization. Are the characters developed over time? Are they stereotypes we recognize immediately? Again, I'm not going to read you these words, but the words are there. You can pick your own. These questions might trigger words for you. Is the focus on a single character or several whose lives are intertwined? Like we talked about in The Lovely Bones and The Mothers, it's about communities. Is the reader, were you expected to identify with the character or just observe them? Here's a really important one. Who's telling the story? What is the point of view? And I don't mean like, was it 3rd person omniscient or 1st person? No, I mean like, I told you like Susie in The Lovely Bones and her sister and her mom and her dad each take turns with the story. But someone mentioned Mexican Gothic, and that's totally only told from Naomi's perspective. Other people are in there. It would be a different story if it was from her cousin's perspective or the local doctor's perspective, or God forbid, the patriarch of the family's perspective. That would be even more terrifying. So, who's telling the story? When I write reviews for Book List and Library Journal, I'm always letting you know who's telling the story because it matters on how the story unfolds for some people. Are there memorable or important secondary characters? And is it a book about the characters, or is it about the story and the action, or is it a combination, right? If it's really about the character more than the plot, you might want to call your book character centered. But I do want to launch a poll, because this is where series come up. So if we can launch that poll, I'm going to put up a choice for people. And the poll is, select one of the following. I actively seek out books in a series. I avoid books in a series like the plague, or I am indifferent. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. This is where series characters come out. I bet there are some of you out there who actually wrote down a series and not just one book as your book. And that's great. So that means for you, characters really matter. And it's interesting, because if you take a book, like for example, a mystery series, you take, because with romance, I think if it's a romance series, the characters are always going to matter. But in a mystery series, you take one book, and someone said that they were reading the Flavia DeLuce series, and this is a great example. I love that series, in your pre-show thing. So in each book, we might not learn a lot about each character. Like especially Flavia DeLuce is a great example. It's clearly focused on Flavia, but we learn so much more about the characters through the course of the series, because she is the protagonist telling the whole story and doesn't know, because she's young, about all these intricacies in her family's lives. So let's see the results. So over time, if you're a series reader, indifferent. Yeah, this is good. And I see the split I always see. Over time, people who read series like characters, even if the individual book isn't character centered. So think about yourself. I love this. This is very common. Half the people are whatever. But then the other half of you are fairly split, right? There are the people that love series. It's always more who love series. And there are people like me who avoid series like the plague. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that greatly. It's funny, series are always the same. I just think that's fun to notice, because it is really important to remember that some people love series. Okay, on to storyline. And that's it with the polls, although get your question window open, because you are going to be asked to share some of your 3 words for your book. This is also a reminder to tell you to start writing some stuff down if you haven't. I can't require it, because this is not one of those times when I do that, but because it's not as long a webinar, but keep writing them down. Storyline. What are your adjectives for the storyline? What is the author's intention in regard to storyline? Does the story emphasize people or situations and events? Is the focus on what's happening, or is it interior more? And also, does the story take place on more than one level? Are there plot twists, right? And then there's a lot of stuff in here about limiters. So if your book has violence to animals, is sexually explicit, has a lot of violence, curse words, you might want to mark it there. I don't call them trigger warnings, but that's where I do write down anything, especially violence to animals, get that written down, because people aren't happy about that. I wrote a review once of a book where there's a dog is like very important, and I made sure it was very clear that the dog makes it to the end, because I didn't want people to be worried. So anyway, so just make sure you're getting, those things written down. And this is a great place to mark maybe some things about your book that, the storyline. I am more of a character reader and less of a story reader. So I don't always have a lot of words here, except if it's character centered. That's a term I use a lot, right? Thought provoking is another one that I use a lot, but I am more of a character reader. So I'm less concerned sometimes with these things in the books I read. Like, I don't care about the ending being open-ended or resolved, but there are people who care. And so they mark this every time. Again, it's your version of your book. Frame and tone are very important. Frame is like the setting, but also if there's like any detailed knowledge, does the detail matter? Does it matter where it takes place? Does it very specifically take place in Tampa, Florida? Or could it be anywhere in the South, right? And like, for example, I'm going to bring up Mexican Gothic because it was brought up. Like, it matters. The town that it takes place in is a very anglicized 1950s anglicized Mexican town, and it's based on a real town. The setting matters. It's very specific, and the details of why and what happens are specific. But there are other horror books that can kind of happen anywhere, right? Just any deserted house in any place, and it's very nebulous. So there's a good example. Speaking of that, bringing up horror, the tone matters, right? If we have a romance book, the tone is going to be lighter, right? But if it's a horror book, it's going to be more menacing. And if it's mystery, it could be anywhere, right? In between. It can be a gentle one, or it can be a really gritty one. Sometimes the frame affects the tone, so we have to think about that. And also with the tone and the mood, we want to think about if you have a nonfiction book, is it a very scholarly presentation of it, or is it more of a popular treatment? A couple people mentioned reading popular colloquial nonfiction in there. So I think that that's great. A bunch of you mentioned that. Like, it's not scholarly, which there's fewer readers who read scholarly nonfiction for fun, although they're there. I always joke that every library can even find somebody who reads like math textbooks for fun. It's not me, but they're there. So we have a lot of words that reflect these things. And again, these are kind of things that you just think of, like think about, was there a specific frame? Great, put it in there. Also, how did a book make you feel? One of my favorites that isn't on here is Heartbreakingly Beautiful. So like, you're gonna cry, but you're like, that was so beautiful. Like, Nicholas Sparks. Stephen Graham Jones does this very well. They're gritty, but also heartbreakingly beautiful. You'll know with your book, right? You'll think of your own words. And then the style and the language, does the writing matter, right? What about the writing? Is it really unpretentious? Is it James Patterson? And the idea is it's fast paced and the words are just there to get you through the story and it doesn't matter each word. Or is it extremely, lyrical? Do you go back and reread sentences? Do you have to re-experience the words? I always like to talk about like Westerns. They are very sparse in their language, but they're also colorful, which is hard to explain, but it explains everything so beautifully, but they're not, pretentious words. So again, you want to think about your book and your words. Now, I know that was quick, but I did that on purpose because you are going to get the handout and you can go through this a little more slowly. However, we talked about, and we're going to talk about it coming up, I want you to start looking at your words while I'm still talking. And in a few slides, I'm going to ask, not yet, I'm going to ask those of you who are willing to share your book's title and author and your quote unquote 3 words. So think about if you want to do that. Think about what you wrote down. Think about the things I asked about. And if you're ready, start maybe circling 3 to share. Not yet. It'll be very clear when you're supposed to share. But I want to remind people that because we're capturing the appeal of the story and not what's happening, you can read widely without reading the books. You're going to get a handout where you're going to, which works through speed reading. And the front of it, it's a 2-sided, will tell you clearly how to speed read a book for its appeal without reading the words. Well, you only read a little bit of them. And then in 10 minutes, although I would say it takes 30 the first time. And on the back, there'll be exercises to do with your staff to practice. This is also from that Joyce Sarik's book. Please do that, okay? But here's the thing, just reading about books, you can learn so much. If you read the 5-star and the 2-star reviews of the book, you can learn about the lovers and the haters. If you read professional reviews, you can learn about the book. You can then share that with other people, right? I'm going to do a speed reading of the book Severance in 2 different versions on the next 2 screens to show you. But also the idea about that you need to speed read widely, please remember, you want to learn about as many books as possible. So make sure you're thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion and reading books, reading about books that maybe you might not know about otherwise, you might not have in your collection, or that from marginalized perspectives, so you know about as many as possible, and also in genres you don't normally like. So let's speed read Severance, okay? I'm going to give you the professional point of view for speed reading and the reader point of view. And they're both important. And for every book, especially those I haven't read, I do this to see what the book's about. And again, if I'm sharing it with a patron, I'm saying, well, let's see what Booklist said. Remember when I told you to think about those 3 words that Severance meant to me? One of them was shifting time frame. You can't see this here, but you do see sardonic, and I said satire, and you do see character driven, and I said character centered, okay? Let me read you this right here, which you might not be able to see, which is the synopsis of the book. A survivor of an apocalyptic plague maintains a blog about a decimated Manhattan before joining a motley group of survivors to search for a place to rebuild, a goal that is complicated by an unscrupulous group leader. That is an extremely linear plot description. Let me tell you something. What did I say? Shifting time frame. That version of the book is going to make a lot of people upset. In fact, it has. It is not a linear story. That person's version of the book, whoever wrote that, and I don't know where they got it from, it could have been from the New York Times, is that it's in order. This book is completely out of order, and that's what I loved about it. All those things happen, but not in order. So it's important to remember to capture your version of the book, because if you shared this with a patron, you might not see everything. Although if you read the reviews, it would be made clear. So you can trust a source like Novelist to do that. The reviews, especially Booklist and Library Journal, who are written to a librarian audience, will capture those things that might not be obvious. And I can say that because I work for them, and I know my reviews do that. Although I purposely picked a book I did not review. Okay. Then we go to Goodreads, we see readers' points of view. A couple things I want to share here about speed reading a book for appeal. What matters here is what readers think, right? Well, I don't care what the professional said. What do readers think? In this case, again, I chose this book on purpose. Most people love this book. 3 means you liked it, didn't love it, right? But 3 and above are liked. Look at the majority is there. Now, the people in the 5, even in the 4, say, I really like this book, but it was a little confusing at times. The people in the 3 are like, I wish it was in order, right? People in 5 are totally sold on it being sort of out of order. And the 2, the ones are just haters, ignore them. Sometimes it's just that like somebody's named after their childhood nemesis. I've literally seen that for a 1-star review. So like, don't look at them. But 2, right? 2, a lot of people are like, this book was too confusing. Now, if you're looking at 5-star and 2-star and you're like, okay, but I have tons of readers who like books that are told out of order. The 2-star actually helps you give it to the right reader. And you'll see those problems. So anything that you, especially if you've read the book, see, I like using Novelist when I haven't read the book more, because it gives me like I get all the reviews. But if I've read the book, also if I haven't, but more importantly, if I've read it, I love seeing what readers say. The other thing you have to love about Goodreads, which I love, 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 are these genres. These are the shelves people put a book on, and people put a book on whatever shelf they want. And so sometimes, and actually I bring up Mexican Gothic usually here, that's one that people put it under the shelf cover love. People judge books by their cover, people. There are people who just pick books based on covers. And you can see all of those books that get tagged cover love if you click on that. At the end of the genre thing, you could actually say see more shelves. These are the most popular. But some people it's just contemporary. For others, it's dystopian, and yet others are apocalyptic and others post-apocalyptic. Those are all different. So go see what readers think. This gives you a sense of all the different things this book can be. Okay, I realize we don't have that much time left, but the most of the reasons why we do Reader's Advisory are in those first things. And by the way, we're about getting ready to share if you want to share. 1 to 5 are the guiding principles. That's why I took most of the time for it. 6 to 10 are about delivering the service. And this is where our change is most notable. There's some good stuff, there's some bad stuff, and there's stuff we're going to keep that was changed. I already talked to you about that whole stop with the books were only important as a space. We already discussed that at the beginning. Here's the thing. To make this go quicker and also to give it the nuance it deserves, there are many links in the next few slides that have so much more detail for you. So please take your time and go through these slides after I'm done and take each issue and look at it in a little more depth. There's no way I'd be able to give it the depth it needed, even if we had 3 hours, okay? But the biggest thing is that RA is in huge demand, so we should be working behind the scenes, especially now that we all have a little bit more off desk time, which is like one of the greatest things that happened, right? They're like, oh, you mean, I feel like more libraries aren't putting people on the desk for their full 8-hour shifts anymore. And I hope that changes, right? Because that's awful. But stocking your RA pantry, it's a whole series, and I'm going to pull a few of them out about what you can do behind the scenes, all staff, to help make a resource for everybody. Update your lists, put books on Goodreads. We're going to do that. And now it is time to share. Share what you read with staff and patrons in the question box. If you'd like to share with Jamie so she can share with everybody, if you'd like to share your book and it's 3 words, you're going to help other people learn about a book that they maybe haven't read, or even better, get a version of a book they've read that's completely different. So please start sharing that. But here's the thing, that's one of the rules. Share, share, share. So if you go through a sheet like the handout, like what we did in the handout you're going to get for every book you read, and write down your adjectives, you can share any book because you have a little phrase to share the book. You can say satire, shifting time frame, character centered, about Severance. And then you might remember that it's an interesting zombie plague book. Because Reader's Advisory is about conversations. It's about creating conversations, not transactions. I said that to you very much earlier. RA is 60% listening. And when we listen to each other, in this case, we're going to listen in the chat, we learn so much more because of all the things we talked about beforehand, right? Now, other ways we can share, I have a great way to do curbside and increase discovery and have conversation starters and ways to increase conversations between you and your patrons with socially distant Reader's Advisory. Things you can keep up though when you do passive RA when people come back. Again, reminding you, you don't have to have read the book. You can share by using the words of others. Booklist said this about it. Goodreads said this. A 5-star review on Goodreads said this, and just read the review. Also, for when we return to more normal times, I have a great step-by-step guide to improve your staff's book talking skills. Although taking this exercise we just did very quickly, using the handout and having people go through their books that they love, and then sharing with each other. If this was a more traditional thing, like with a whole library staff, we would do breakout rooms, and I would give people like, it's depending on 2 minutes each in their breakout room. So if there's 3 people, 6 minutes to share. One person would share and the others would listen. And it's really good practice for doing this. But the step-by-step guide to improving book talking skills is a little more formal, and I've gamified it. So you can take a look at those later. Then we go to rule 7, and this is going to become important also because you want to use your resources. For some reason, people think of Reader's Advisory, it has to all be off the top of your head. I just said, use the words of others. It doesn't. I've told you, you don't have to read the book. You can have read about it. Give yourself space and permission. And one way I do that is to call Reader's Advisory leisure reading reference, right? I know I said we're not about transactions, but that's how we think, right? If we say, if we equate, because for some reason reference is higher than Reader's Advisory, but if we give ourselves permission to think of ourselves as doing a reference service, then when we're sharing books, we don't mind using resources. A really great way to encourage the normalization of using resources and a great conversation starter to have a Reader's Advisory conversation, which is more about, let's talk about the books you're reading and why you love them, right? Because if you're sharing them that way with your 3 words, you can get your patrons to start doing it. But I love asking my patrons how they find their book suggestions. Why is this so great? One, it's a super great conversation starter, right? Because they're like, wait, I'm here asking you. You want to know about me? Ooh, I feel so special. The librarian wants to know how I find books. And it's a great way to talk about it. It's also a great way that you can use those resources first to then help them find books. Another thing I like to talk about in that post is you can then compile their suggestions and turn that into a web list. Our patrons love these resources. Check them out too, right? Just a really great way to show you're listening, right? And you learn a lot. It's a really fun thing to do, and it gives you a whole new world of places to find suggestions. I also have my favorite resources to use awards lists, and that goes to a whole series of posts, and then my general list on my very genre specific resources. So just use them. But here's the thing, working with each other is your most valuable resource. I cannot stress this enough. Working together will help lighten the load for all. Again, that entire Stock Your RA Pantry series is about how to work together while socially distant, but it's also about getting everything beefed up so you have resources. The easiest place to do work together is on Goodreads, even before the pandemic, but especially now. Why? Everybody on staff, and there's a much longer post about it, but very quickly, if everyone who wants to on staff, we can't force people, especially in a union environment, but I would highly encourage everyone to get a Goodreads account with their work email address, because Goodreads are tied to your email address, right? So that way people don't have to abandon their personal one. And you should be allowed on your personal to love or hate books, but on your work one, you should only be talking about positive books that you would recommend. Don't hate on any books. Do that on your personal account. And I talk about on there how we can get people, even if they just go to Novelist and cut and paste the appeal terms and say appeal terms from Novelist, and pick the ones that are their favorites and give it star rating, you can share that with other people. Because as we're going to see, we're going to have an exercise for the whole staff where we learn everyone's preferences. So you might be getting a question about true crime, but you know that actually somebody who works in children's who's not here right now loves the most grisly, disgusting true crimes, which you had no idea until you did this exercise I'm going to send you home with for all staff. because why would you? No, they can't talk about it at the desk. That's the other fun thing about letting everybody participate. But you know that Susie is not here, but her Goodreads, because you asked her to get one, is filled with all her favorite true crime books. And it tells you why she liked them, right? She reviewed them, even if it's just a few words. Or you can go look them up on Novelist. Then the whole point is you have a resource where you can say, hey, I didn't read it, but Susie, who works in children's, loves true crime. And they can be like, wait, what? Yeah, don't go talk to her while she's working because there's kids around. But yes, and here's what she recommended. You're working together. You're also showcasing to your staff or to your patrons that your staff is a valuable resource because you're showing that everyone does that. The other thing about Goodreads is if everybody gets a Goodreads and you tell people, hey, you give a book 5 stars, you can participate in our staff recommendation shelves. Our staff is more diverse than our capital L librarians as a whole. And when we get everyone, and I mean, I have a library where the janitor had the most things on the staff recommendation shelves because until I came, they didn't ask him to participate in their brand. I don't know why. He works at the library. You know, the brand is books. He can make a lot more being a janitor somewhere else. And well, now they have his recommendations on the staff recommendation shelf all the time because he's crazy busy on Goodreads and they're using his recommendations and they can say, hey, this is our janitor George told us about this book. Really? Oh my gosh, everybody here reads. It's just, there's nothing negative about working together. And the camaraderie that it builds is amazing. Very quickly, I've been talking about this since I went back and looked since 2013. I gave my first keynote on how to bridge the physical virtual divide. Nothing showed us this more that we can do this than 2020. People told me all the time, Becky, this is great, but you know, our digital people won't let us go online and we're not supposed to be on social media as the library, blah, 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 blah. All those excuses, guess what? They're all gone now. We did it and it worked. No time, this was starting before the pandemic, but there's no excuse now. No one sees your library as a physical building and a virtual space as distinct. Everyone now knows they're the same thing. And you know, we were almost there, and that's one of the good things about the pandemic, that it showed everybody that we're there in both spaces and we can fill the need when we have to. These are some examples of ways you can bridge the physical virtual divide. But even things just like posting a picture on Instagram of a current display in the building and linking to a list of the books that fit that topic. There's just so many different ways to do things and you can read about them in more detail, but start realizing that your staff or your patrons don't see you separately. So try to get everything you do in the building online somehow and everything online in the building. You're already doing it. So again, we've shown them we've done it. We can't stop now. Look at all of those much longer posts on the topic. And then our last rule, which is to practice. The first two are great practices you can do by yourself. And if you go into those posts, you can learn more about how to do them. But I'm going to talk to you about the reader profile exercise, which is available to download at that link. And you're going to get it on the web resources page from Jamie. But I want to just show it on the screen because this reader profile is for every person on staff. If every person on staff fills out this reader profile, you get a snapshot of every book that people love at your library, your whole staff, what the strengths and weaknesses are. You'll even know who likes what genres. So when you do this, you would send it out, you would have copies returned, and you would keep a record of all the copies. So you, as the person sort of in charge, because you came to this, could do like a pie chart and like statistics and data about everyone as a whole. But also then we can mix them up and we can share with each other the reader profile so everyone can practice being the reader's advisor and being the patron, because you need to feel both sides of the interaction. Again, reconnect with yourself as a reader. So what we do then is we don't do one-to-one. So I don't change with Jamie and Jamie changes with me. We want to also use it as a team building exercise, right? So I might get Jamie's, Jamie might get Susie's, Susie's might get Johnny's, Johnny might get Victor, and Victor I might get Victor's. The whole point is we want to mix it up as much as possible. And if you can, try to give it to people who don't know each other. If you have multiple branches, make sure people are at different branches, right? Use it for people to get to know each other. It's a very simple form. 3 books you like and why, 3 books you don't like and why. The areas you like reading with room for other, not genres, areas. The formats you enjoy reading. This is also good just to see what formats people are reading and then to look, they really like true crime and graphic novels. Do we have enough true crime graphic novels? there are a bunch, but you can check your collections then too, because while you're searching, you'll be like, wow, we don't really have anything on that, but I found all these books. Maybe we should add more. It's just such a great exercise for you to learn your collection, to learn about your staff, to learn about doing this. But here's the thing, right? You're doing all the work to match somebody, and you can give them back their answers and they'll tell you how you did, but you're also getting them back, which is like so much fun, right? You get to hate on books, the types of books you enjoy the least. Somebody might not have an information there. Doing this profile helped me realize that I don't like wishy-washy protagonists, which is why I don't like romance. I could never figure it out, right? I don't like the whole like, oh, just figure out the problem and just fall in love already. Like I don't like all that back and forth. Some people love it. I don't. That's why I don't like romance. I could never figure it out. And oh, look, something we heard before. What are your favorite resources to use when looking for a good read for yourself? This is a great way to compile that list from staff, right? Lots of staff you've maybe never asked before of where they find books to read. You're going to learn about new resources, and you can make another list of our staff's favorite resources. But also, if you're helping somebody, starting with their favorite resource to find books for themselves is a great place to start. No, not only because you know that you'll get suggestions that they found before, like but it'll also be like so you can know limitations of that resource and maybe give them a new resource to use. If you'd like to see more about a COVID success case study of a library that had no reader's advisory before the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we did training, and this page, Meet the Book Chat Team, which you can click on the live slides, it'll take you to that page and explain all the things they do now. They literally went with one training from me and a couple phone calls from nothing to this, and it was people that never knew each other. They were all different branches. Some of them had never met in person before, but also an example of their Goodreads page. Back further when I said get busy on Goodreads, there's more examples of libraries, but this is a great example to show how you can make those things work. Again, please take your time. Applying the Reader's Advisory Service is so much more personalized. I give you lots of examples and longer thought pieces on it, so you can pick what's right for you. Nobody's going to do everything, but I'm trying to give you examples. So that is the end. If you have any questions, again, don't forget to check out the 5 resources you cannot live without. And I just like in the spirit of sharing, like, is simplifying, getting it down to 3 words, you can really describe the reader's advisory process as that you need to read or read about, right? Reflect, record, and record the things that you can't find other places. Record your version of the book. And then purposely a different letter, share, because that's a different thing, right? You're getting out there and you're sharing it. So make sure you're doing that. You're not just putting it down, you're sharing it. And then you might share it verbally, but some people might share it with a video, and some people might share it just on Goodreads, but share. And then just repeat it over and over again. Start to get your patrons to participate, but you just get your staff doing it. And if there are any questions, I will take them. I know there's only 2 minutes left.